Okay, hello again, and welcome back to the project. I initially, after PsoDRM5, I had intended to return immediately to really that northwest exposure and dealing with that roof and what we're going to do with the chimney and etc. But before I even, at the tail end when I made PSO4, I had put together a walkthrough, which is a little pathway that the camera follows, to at least show the issues with which you're going to be dealing on the interior. But I didn't do it at PsoDRM5. So the first thing I did when I started working again after that was complete, which must have been about 628B and A, is we were going to be dealing with this here. So I put together these two little slides. I didn't even model this because I know that this isn't going to look good. So that must have been, I arrived at 630A. And then I thought I'll just put together a walkthrough first. And so this was that walkthrough, and this was just to show some of the issues and different things. I wanted to see what it was looking like inside, the different things we're going to be dealing with. And I wanted you also to be able to see that and get a feel for how you're going to put together that inside. And that really led down a pathway that didn't return me to the exterior really probably for another week or so. And then the exterior kind of consumed me as well. But right now I just want to get something to you. It doesn't matter how quickly you respond to some of this stuff, any of this stuff. You can proceed at your own pace, and that's what I advise you do in the strongest terms possible, because it's a big project and this covers a lot of the different things that need to be addressed. But to me there's still a lot of room, at least some room, for improvement here and there. And then furthermore, with regard to this particular film and the interior, it follows another pathway, but it solves a myriad of different interior issues on the first and second floor, and going back and forth from the interior to the exterior as well. So this is a very involved film, and I expect it's going to be long. So take it, in bits and pieces, or however you like. But this is going to be the different kinds of things that I followed up. And to finish that thought then, with regard to this film and the interior, a significant amount of the interior, but I think it was justified because of our conversations at the start of this project. A lot of the interior, a significant part of it, is based upon or grew out of a text that Gary had sent me a week or two ago. About so far into this, a few days into this, I got this text. And that text was in response to PsoDRM5 and the rear elevation that we talked about at the end of that film. And whether, if we made that roof over the rear addition a higher pitched gable type roof, whether that might not allow for a set of spiral staircase, some sort of stairs to the second floor to be created back there. And so yes, at the time I responded probably, because it seemed to me that that was probably possible, and that I would get back with him, and that was on July 1st. So it's now July 14th, and hopefully this reaches you sometime today. So yes, a certain amount of the things that I pursued at the interior were based upon getting stairs to the second floor, and beyond just the reasons that we talked about, and we wanted to have it from a house and an estate approach. With any extra space we add back there, it kind of loses a substantial piece of its value without being able to get to it without going through bedroom 4 at the top of the stairs. And so I thought there was good reason to explore for, and you were going to have possibly an office up there over the patio, so I wanted to follow that out, and I followed it out to where I arrived anyway. And that's part of this film is to share with you. But I will warn you, at the exterior, a number of different pathways I followed out, and I'll show you how they impacted the second floor. Some of it's just downright ugly, and I just wouldn't draw the plans for that, because it's just not right. And what I finally arrived at is really, after much work with it, really is still to me is sitting at some sort of a compromise at that front. But I think right now it's actually livable. If you told me to make the drawings, I would make them, and I could live with that. I still think there's a decent amount of room for improvement in various places, both at the front and the rear and so forth. Different things that I know that I could take a look at. But I want to tear myself away from it long enough to get this much over to you before I will definitely be returning to it. But all of this is always just at whatever pace you prefer. I personally couldn't get away from the project, so this is what you have. So finally, there's this first walkthrough where I want to look at the various issues that were going to have to be addressed. This 503. And right away, starting with the early 20th century hardware, I knew there was going to be some things to fix up. And this room in particular coming into, I knew that we had to decide, if we were going to be integrating this space out here, this breezeway space, with what's happening in there. Additionally, my first question was with regard to that transition right there that you see, and how we are going to, what the different ways we are going to use to address that. And then there was the interior trim and the interior doors and hardware that I knew that we're going to have to correct that. Additionally, I wasn't sure about this real simple trim that I was showing at the window. And once I got into the big room and saw a wall sticking down through there, and this was the extent of the interior finish at the time, and there was no kitchen, and I knew we need to have at least some kitchen represented so that we could figure out some certain decisions of how things were going to work together and feel together. And one of the things to keep in mind that I never do really address is the left side of that window to the right of the entry door, and how it interfaces with any kind of tile backsplash. So that was just one issue that I didn't end up addressing in this particular film, but something that I think needs looked at. And then just coming quickly through here, and there were a number of things that I noticed that obviously need addressed and done. In particular, that I began to put together some of that interior things that I want to talk about, including in the kitchen. The kitchen I put together all according to Gary's plan, and that all seems to have worked out very well. And this film will show a few more details. Gary's text came in sometime during the making of this film, as I recall. One of the things this film will be asking or considering is how much of that interior is all treated at once, in terms of at least of the trim and the doors. And does that begin at the entrance to bedroom 4, the top of the stairs? And that will play into some of the questions the film raises. And the first of those is whether or not how separate these rooms will be. And in here, a couple of things that happened is I wanted to look up a little bit more of an elaborate trim, slightly more elaborate trim for these windows and doors. And so before I was showing the simple 5/4 by 5 lintel, And this apparently is more or less considered farmhouse trim. Both the crown mold that's been added at the hull and the way these windows and doors are now being treated. And right now, the breezeway is being kept separate from the rest by that small header that comes across. And the first trip through, these doors were changed to just a 2-panel, and this, I think I talked about this in an earlier film, that can be changed up at any time. But that's what's being represented right now. And things that, I mean, if you went to a 5-panel horizontal, 5 horizontal panel, that's really going to impact, you know, the feel of the place. So that's something to consider. In the kitchen, all these materials in the kitchen, including the cabinet style and the countertop, all this is kind of kept as neutral as possible. And the kitchen is a 96-inch plus kitchen. So the way I treated that is to add that crown mold, that farmhouse crown mold, grows out of where those kitchen cabinets are. So it's about 4 1/4 net from the top of the cabinets to fill in the top of some of those cabinet spaces and to continue as a crown mold around this room, because I think it looks pretty blank without it. I think that was shown in the last clip. And here I'm showing both of these windows low, and I'm showing a traditional backsplash. Now, I don't know if I show, but a lot of times they don't have that 5-inch backsplash on top of the counter, and they just run that tile all the way down. And I may have even discussed it in another film. But this shows essentially how the outlets, I think, would probably be required to be arranged in this sort of scenario with the windows low like this. And there's panels shown at the end of those cabinets in this particular one, or in most of them going forward. I show the ends of those cabinets finished as with a real panel. And then we have this long view with the barn doors in place and open at the moment. And with regard to these barn doors, we'll want to decide what exactly the hardware is going to be, because the way I've done it kind of required me to run that lintel further over the end to hold the bracket. But there must be different styles. I didn't spend a lot of time on that, but I did want to at least show it so we would have a feel for its impact. And out here, I was pretty sure I wanted to look at a few other alternatives at this transition here. Then I added on to the walkthrough, began to look back in this area here. One of the questions is whether that elaborate or that crown mold is carried through all of this, at least through all of the first floor spaces, excepting perhaps the breezeway, and this is bothersome transition right there to me as well. Coming into the kitchen, this is a different treatment of the cabinetry all the way around the kitchen, particularly over the range, but at the other 2 main cabinets on that end as well. And the dishwasher's still missing in this particular film. It's pushed out into the yard somewhere. And I'm kind of showing you these various clips more or less in the order in which I made them, because of those are how the different things that I encountered while I made them. For example, part of the clip on this side of the closed barn doors was put together the night of the 1st, the night after, or that evening after Gary's text. And this part was put together by the next night about that same time. And it was put together, just rudimentary, with a rudimentary research on these spiral stairs. And this one's wrong. It shows like a 180-degree turn. It takes 270 to get up, apparently. But I'd put this together more or less just to see. I knew that we were going to need 6/8 clearance off any riser to any ceiling surface above us. And I thought we'd be able to put this in here and somehow follow the slope of a gable roof over this addition at the back. But I soon found out, at least with it here in the corner, in this corner, the left corner, we needed more than just the gable roof. We needed also a shed dormer looking out as well. And when I promised you some ugly things at the start, this is probably going to be part of it. But we'll just let this section run. And this was just this first look at, before I researched these spiral stairs a little bit more. Now, that said, all of the spiral stairs that I'll show going forward from here, and any of the spiral stairs that I show going forward here are essentially built on a 56-inch diameter, and giving a 24-inch clear between the center and the edge of the rail. That's how I designed it and put it together as far as working with the spiral stairs. Once I put the actual model of a true, what it would take, a true spiral stair, what it would take to get up here, which is 270 degrees turn. And after I'd put that together, by the time I put that together, because of how clunky and ugly this looked from the outside, from the south, and was just adding so much structure to that piece out there, that I began to explore moving that spiral stairs to a different location in the house, or just wanted to see because there's so much mass back here and so much things going on, and it's adding this whole extra room at the back end. And we've got the one at the west, presumably over the covered patio. And so I wasn't sure about adding all of this space. But I knew that if this piece were added, if this back piece were added, which I began to call a bonus room going forward, we almost needed to, if it was going to be finished like this, if it wasn't just going to be storage space, that we would really want stairs up there to serve that room and the other room as well. But I didn't bother putting any of this top stuff together to any great detail because I was already recognizing issues with it. But at least according to this film, it looks like I did put together at least enough of that upstairs, enough of this stairwell to see, what that ends up there if a person was to do this. And I did not put up a wall between the room proposed over the patio and this rear bonus room. And that's bedroom 4 there to the left, and then coming back around. And continued apparently to develop this up here, even though that existing dormer just looks at the chimney. It's probably not viable, I don't think. Certainly at this point I didn't think, and I still don't think that is viable to just leave in place. But I finished developing this upstairs in case this were actually desired, and the clunkiness outside were not so objectionable. And mostly I was just trying to pick up the issues we were going to have, and that stairwell is trying to do some sort of windowing that would work with the windowing downstairs, and with how we're going to have a railing on that edge. But again, these stairs were not actually fully developed. And if I return to putting the stairs back in this corner, after all this is said and done, it could work out a little differently going up, but I don't think it's going to change the clunkiness. Again, I'm just showing you these slides in the order in which I created them to show you the various issues I ran into, and this is just awfully
There was a
much
quick,
and awfully
unsatisfactory
clunky.
attempt to
And I
solve
really
the
didn't
railing.
think
That was going to be viable.
The stairwell. In terms of the roof itself, thought this was a little more viable than that. Of course, this abandons any kind of spiral stairs in this corner. Whether they could be worked into this corner, come up in the center, I would assume that they could, but I just didn't think that was going to be very viable. So I went to that for the structure back there, for the roof over that for now, leaving a fairly large bonus room up there at the moment, whether that's attic space or not. This is how I did this roof right now at that moment. Then I started playing around with these windows, putting some casings on them, and you can just see that this is just hideous. I mean, this is not a vast improvement, but it is an improvement over that, which I would not want to draw that. And different windowing here, you know, this is a little modern, but I want to take a look at it, just trying to balance this bottom part. With various window arrangements. Then I pulled that top all the way back to where the only thing is a hall there, because I began to develop those spiral stairs in the corner of the living room back behind these sliding doors. And so I worked with various things here to make the windows inside work with what was happening, and to make it at least viable out here. Then I returned to what appeared to be your original plan. And I couldn't tell, you just showed one window over here on this east wall, at least what I could see. So I assume that's just a picture window, I'm not sure. But you can help to clarify that. Then I raised this rear roof pitch to a 412, just shortened these windows to little transom units. And I know that a lot of this is a lot and probably will not be built, but I wanted to look at everything, I suppose. And that was the entire series of photos on that southwest corner. And that was as good as it got, at least at that moment, which is why I said I thought there was still room for improvement. Then I want to show you this next series of slides, which has to do with floor planning, apparently, and these spiral stairs. And as I said, this one is not a viable staircase. I mean, it's just not constructed correctly. Whether it could be going over there is a real possibility. It might work better over there. It would come up like this in that room. This is still showing that big clunky dormer out here. So I started looking at other places to put this spiral stairs. And this is apparently still not after I completely developed them into actual spiral stairs, which starts and comes around 270 degrees to reach the top. But this is the exterior version out here on the porch, on the patio, on the covered patio, and it comes up like this inside. So that would have to be enclosed up there in some fashion. But I left that alone for the moment and worked on this whole south elevation. So this next series of slides is all about this south elevation here. Largely this south elevation is being treated, and at that it's largely just the window replacements and what is going to happen at each of those. I want to mention right at the start though that those windows up in the dormers back here are shown as 35 by 35, which if you get them with the optional side pivot hardware, those will actually meet egress requirements, at least in those bedrooms, at that bedroom 3 and then the... So beginning with the laundry room window, according to pellet sizes, it can either be a little taller or a little bit shorter with some sort of the expander at the bottom. With those similarly, I believe, the breezeway window, that is going to be shorter with some fill at the bottom, that bottom expander. The garage window, same situation, it becomes a little shorter with the expander at the bottom and at the sides. And then we have this bedroom window, the master bedroom window, and it would become shorter. It can also become longer if you want to lower that sill. The little bathroom window I had been showing as this double casement. It's actually too fat really for that. So it goes down to this 35 by 35. Well, actually, so you can either have that in the bathroom, which is 34 inches wide, or this, which is 35. I believe those both run pretty tight in that bathroom, but the next size down is going to be 29 wide, which could also be doable, but you'd have 3 or 4 inches of fill on each side. And I looked at this Pella built-in trim, particularly the flat stuff. I figured that that's more or less, and you can see it here. If you buy it from Pella, it's all, the same color as the windows if you wanted black or any of their other colors. And the sill is treated similarly like that with this extra piece and then 1x4 underneath. But I just used a sill nosing, regular sill nosing, one of these anyway, under those windows when I began to treat these windows over here. At that point, with that window design, when I ran into that bathroom window and I thought that was going to be a problem, I looked at a few other things in this region here and I made some changes that might have to be reverted. So what I was proposing with these two slides is flipping the laundry room window in the master bedroom, the new replacements, and putting the triple unit in the master bedroom and a double unit in the laundry. Now, and you increase that space to the left of this window in the laundry, but it does require this exterior brick fill work on this side of this window and on this side of this one here, as well as whatever framing work would be required to create that change. But I actually did that and left that alone, and that'll be shown in some of the ongoing slides, and it'll show an elevation of it. But also the bathroom window, I went down, and it's not shown in elevation, but it's shown in some of the exterior shots. This bathroom window, neither of those that I first showed were going to be viable. So this goes down to a 25-inch wide unit so that you have some room on either side of that casing. And then this becomes 3'3" wide alcove for the toilet. Because the 211 is just side to side. It's just too tight. So I proposed using a 25-inch wide and just using expander on the outside on each side. And so that's what I ended up doing with those 3 windows, and I left that alone for the rest of this film. That's how it exists right now. Also in this slide, and you may disagree with anything seen so far, but also in this slide, this doorway is taken down to a 3'0" wide to allow for casing to put on it, because I think you saw in the one early walkthrough, that's a little funky right there. So I took that down to a 36-inch wide opening, still centered on this master bedroom this way, but providing some margin here for the casings. And returning to the floor planning then, this was with that exterior spiral stairs, and we would have to create some sort of room for that to come up that's closed off. Something like this, so that this is weatherproof here, and then this is the opening that goes down through to the patio downstairs. And so I started looking at different alternatives with regard to that stairwell, and whether it could be gotten into this corner of the room here, and how much room we would need upstairs to access it from a common area so that everyone up here could come down through there. And then I actually looked into how these things are put together and what exactly happens. And what I found, it forces me to retract anything that was mentioned about 270 degrees, because according to what I was able to find, for a rise of this type going up this high, it looks to me like it takes over 360 degrees. So if you start on the blue tread at the bottom, you end up on the red tread at the top. And so there were only a couple ways that that sort of thing was going to fit in here. And I don't know, I might have showed this one here, but you'd be starting here and ended up in the corner of the room at the top. So this was the most viable, at least at that time, this was the most viable that I thought, was putting it in like this, coming up through here, and coming back down that same way with this common area up here. Then, even though I wasn't sure that this was even viable from your planning perspective on that first floor area, I did continue to relentlessly pursue it to see where it would lead to. And an opening for the floor, I think that it may be best for the head of the stairs to end up like that at the top, but that made the beginning something like this, where you're facing the wall. Then I wanted to look at it coming up that way, like this, and this is what I settled on. So maybe the 270 works, I don't know, but you start there and you end up here. So the 270 is actual. As near as I could tell, the 270 is actual fact. So 270 degrees, because you start down here and you end up like this at the top. And it's like this down here. And then I had all this bric-a-brac going on up through this opening. There's really just a couple ways to treat that. I just had so much going on through there. And like this at the top, and that was really taking up space as well. So I got away from all of that. And the next thing though, before I got away from all that, the next thing was this wasn't going to work with this door, these door systems set up this way. And that required an additional change on that facade, a pretty substantial change, where I just took both of those doors out and put in a 13'9" 4-panel sliding unit that parts in the middle. And I know this is a substantial departure from what you had drawn, and so it may not work. And this can actually be longer than that, although this is a bearing wall here, and so we're going to have, if it got to the 15'9", I think the next size up is a couple feet wider. It would come over here and still would work fine. Take up this whole room in glass, or this whole wall almost in glass, but this might have to be thickened to a 2x6 wall to accommodate a beam sizable enough to carry that across. And I wanted to simplify all that bric-a-brac going up through the ceiling. So I took it, the choice was either take it all the way away and let the crown mold continue to carry around like that, or break the crown mold, and I actually elected to just break the crown mold and have the wall continue up to the floor. And this kind of left me with this upstairs. And here though, by this point I had developed a couple shed dormers out here that are also pretty hideous, but they had increased the floor space of this bedroom as well, but they did add these 2 egress windows in this bedroom not facing the chimney under a shed dormer here. You'll see that in a minute or 2 or 5, but it's pretty ugly. But nevertheless, I made some other developments in that bedroom. Going forward, I added a closet over on the other wall, mainly because that bedroom became so large with this unviable addition. And I continue to run these walkthroughs to solve various issues. And these two little clips here will just show you where I've relocated the location of that toilet in the bathroom and brought that chimney out as well into the room. And this next one unites this whole space, taking out that thing, puts the crown around the breezeway. Doesn't change the breezeway floor, but it does that much anyway. And it probably gives you a little bit more of a better look at this kitchen. I think I modified it a little bit. We did a little start to get a better feel for that space, adds the chairs in, and so forth. And how this was going to feel like this. Still has all the bric-a-brac in that opening up there, so it's fairly early film. And that was the windowing arrangement in those rooms at that point. This next run here is the first run all the way through the plan as it then existed at that point. And we keep looking into the bathroom, but that's beside the point. I pulled that chimney back where it doesn't project as far into the room, only 4 inches. Still up the bric-a-brac up there. So I think this one's and I've made some changes on this one at this front step. Here you see these changes in the bedroom and laundry with moving those windows and the different window changes in those rooms. Coming out backwards and leaving. And then upstairs, that's the bonus room at the back. Closet on the left and stairwell coming up, and this was this unviable shed addition. Sadly, that was just not going to work. That's a big queen bed shown there, and this is, nothing great in here either. But that was that first run through with various things that were happening. There's a closet at the top of the stairs, now 2 closets actually at the top of the stairs. You might also notice that the fireplace has been enlarged. Bringing that in gave you greater depth, so we assume a little greater height as well on that fireplace box, which is what's shown here at this tail end of this clip. This was just this first trip up the stairs with that molding broken as shown. And so as I was trying to develop something that would work out here on the front end of this, this is how this was changing these floor plans. And this was that first one with this, to me, quite unviable shed, dormer. And that was when I brought the shed out and engaged it with the chimney, brought the whole shed dormer out, and engaged it with the chimney, trying to get a little bit lower, but you just need so much room for these egress windows that it was difficult to do that. It was impossible to do it, actually. But this one actually separated them into 2 separate shed dormers. You'll see that outside when we get out there. But this separated them into 2 shed dormers. And yet it was this huge bedroom 4 once we pushed out even further like that. And this was, it was really clunky out here regardless. So I didn't feel like I was going to get something viable to work out here with a dormer around that. And I tried, you'll see, tried some other things as well out there. And so these skylights, some of these skylights, the right ones, are qualified for egress. Some don't, but some qualify. So there's this type that opens from the top, which is the one I ended up showing, and this one that opens from the side. And when that's put together, then you have something like this, where these are the two skylights. And then if you use that to solve the egress requirements, and you almost have to put two just for it to look right inside and out, even though this one doesn't really need the hardware, the special hardware. This could be fixed. One of the other could be fixed. But I'm showing two. The ceiling slopes all the way down to these little short knee walls at this end, and then this is a taller 5-foot wall out here. These next films will show the impact, how these spaces feel. So this, what's shown here is these two egress windows on the roof slope, making this bedroom code compliant, and an actual regular gabled dormer out the office exercise room. I really like what this does for this space here. Even if that room down there is completely abandoned, I like what it does for that space there. And if that room is completely abandoned, even that's the minimal approach on the abandonment of that. And I believe this keeps us centered on that peak out there. But I'll run these two clips that show how this particular space feels inside. And there's actually several clips, because you'll see this dormer kind of made it smaller and larger, horsed around with it a little bit. Getting closer to the end, this was actually how I ended up treating this wall on the left, with a smaller cabinet separated from that there, regardless of what happens on this back wall here. And this was looking at these office and den windows, and again, I was probably confused about this end. But this just looked at a couple different alternatives with big picture windows, 4 big picture windows, and then operating flanking windows, so that these ones become wider flanking windows than these ones. These are 29s and these are 35s. But at the end, I believe I really liked the one with all the separate windows the best. And this was another thing that I did, where these were all operating or fixed, however you wanted it, with these sizes and grouped like this, where all of these become the same size windows. 29, 59s on this back wall, but it's 2 groups of 4 instead of a group of 3 and a group of 4. But that was just different experimentation I was working with back here. Here's one at the top. 3 across the top. Those are a couple different things that would work up there in that hallway if that rear bonus room were completely abandoned. So we had I4, and I moved the queen bed over, and this door could probably swing into that room. It'd probably be better if that swung into the room like that. And as I recall, I didn't like this offset here, and plus I didn't like this dormer this big out here anyway. So the next thing I did when I went to J, or to the next one, probably when I went to J, was make that dormer smaller and just go down to a twin window in it like this, so that these walls have an alignment. And then downstairs, by the time we reached plan 707J, I had separated these into these separate windows. With a large picture window, it's actually 59 by 59 at this end, but you'll have to clarify what is going to happen there. But I went back to this individual, and the spacing, they're all the same size, 25-59, but these ones are spaced a little closer than these ones, so that we can get this more balanced outside, or at least that was my feeling. And finally, a review of this exterior, such that it is. But this was this shed dormer set back from the chimney. And I tried to make it a little bit less, and this was engaging it with the chimney and separating it out from the other dormer, making two separate shed dormers. But at the end of the day, it was just too clunky. And then we have the two egress skylights. And the last move I made over there, and we'll see that on the rest, but I made these windows a little bit shorter and brought this brick wall up a little bit more. Like that. But here is the review of this exterior as I developed these various, struggling to find something that would work. First, there was that whole unified dormer where this still sat back from the chimney. And then there was the attempt to engage that with the chimney, making that room giant and really increasing its mass out here and making it worse than what it was before. Even bringing it down some. Everything's still code compliant here, but it's still clunky from outside when you rotate around. And this one's the same thing, there's just too much right there, at least that was my feeling. So we go down to the skylights and a separate dormer here. If you wanted this adds a lot of space up here in this room, maybe 70 feet or so. And the windows that face the north, which is an art studio type thing there with north facing windows. But you can get that view and light from skylights as easy. Look at some dormers on that end. I think adding stone to the chimney outside helps everything a lot, really. But that's I don't know, one way or the other. I liked adding the stone to the outside of the chimney. And there is the move of bringing these windows up to make a judgment on that, making them a little smaller, and bringing that brick work up higher. And there are things happening back at that rear room as well. There's that modern corner window look. And this was when that dormer was made a little smaller to have those walls align up there. I think it's probably better as a smaller dormer than a larger one. Almost surely, because that gets to be pretty big. I think there's a couple rotations around a couple of these, and I won't be commenting on those, and that will be really the end of this for now. I kind of like this look here at the back. Oh, this was at the big bonus room up there, but I think this grouping of windows is fine. that's going to be the end of that for now, as promised. Let me know at your convenience any of your thoughts on any of this. Even though I didn't get exactly where I kind of hoped to get, it was still a lot of interesting stuff along the way that had to be addressed in any event. Now you have too much to think about, probably. But as I said, at your convenience anytime. Thanks very much, and it's been delightful. Okay, although you probably suspected that it was not over, after I had even uploaded that to YouTube, it just felt that like there was at least something missing from that video to kind of wrap things up. So I returned to this briefly just to do a few things that I wanted to do that I knew could improve things, A, and B, I wanted to look at an alternative location. I wanted to see if this spiral stairs would fit in the den. And that's what the second floor was at that point at 707J2. And I knew I was going to have to move this out. I wanted to create some dimension on this wall. And so I've moved this out. It's kind of a bare minimum. 2 feet would probably look better if it was 3 feet more. One or the other of those had to come out. And so I chose this one and brought it out 2 feet, so that alleviates some of the space that's taking up. And the other thing that was done is I moved these doors all the way down to 2 28-inch leaves, so that's a 56-inch door opening there. And I was able to accomplish this stairs going up this way to the second floor. Once I was able to do that, then we didn't have to. There was other things we could have done with this door, even with the stairs in there. But once those stairs are out of the way, this door can kind of be at least put back to the center of the room. I mean, you could just have 4 panels with 1 6-foot door, but I reverted to the original plan with these 3 panels, essentially two. And I believe that these are all, I think these are 5.5 feet, and these flanking units are 30 inches, so they look about evenly sized. This is just with the den doors closed. And so that would be the whole plan on the first floor at this point, 717C, with these further modifications. And this is what you end up with on the second floor, moving this from basically here back to here. And this is how it's shaped up from the outside. So you can see a little bit more would help this. I mean, I could have bigger overhangs on the roof, would also help it. But I maintained that horizontal band just like at the garage at these 2 facades here. And this was still with the big 4-panel sliding, single sliding door like that. And this is reverting to the 2 sets of doors. I didn't want to leave that last film alone at 52 minutes because so much of it had relied on moving into that living room, and I'm not sure what you had planned in terms of furniture and so forth in there. So I was glad I was able to return to the original kind of idea and concept of if we were going to put a stairs, putting it back in that den once I got things further figured out. And there was no need to make nothing changes from that northeast angle. But here are then this is the final walkthrough of the whole building with all the final updates through this date with this particular plan, 717C. First, although I'm not sure what your plan was, I did just unite these spaces by making the same floor covering everywhere. Then I used whatever measurement and etc. that it would take to make these window and door heads align. And by the way, all of these window and door heads shown throughout here are actually composed of about a 4.5 inch piece with a 3/4 inch piece on top. So the whole thing is only 5.5 or so tall. And secondly, out here for this particular film, I put a flat garden bed out there, just an inch or two below the level of the sidewalk, but completely flat. And the only issue with that is that is all the way up above the floor framing. So if something like this is done, some serious consideration is going to have to be given to waterproofing that whole wall where it has that exposure, where the grade is up that high. So I did want to mention that.